Hi folks, welcome to the 15th video recording. I got the number wrong yesterday on the video, sorry. Just as well I'm not some sort of super duper mathematician, eh? We'd have rockets hitting the moon every 5 minutes. Today we're going to talk about the Declaration of Arbroath, which will be no surprise to anybody that knows us. The Ruth Wishart article in the National. We Ginger Doug's article, which Stuart picked up on.
That is the Declaration of Arbroath.
What, he just wrote the Declaration of Arbroath out?
No, that's what it's about.
Well, right, okay. And I think Boris needs a mention, plus the resignation of our, what was she? Chief Medical Officer. So Stuart, we'll let you go on the Declaration of Arbroath and we Ginger Doug's take on it.
Well, as most of you will know that are watching and listening, today is the actual anniversary, the 700th anniversary of the Declaration of Arbroath, which is regarded these days as a Scottish equivalent of the Magna Carta, in as much as what it stands up for is the people's right to choose the king and to put limits on what the king does. And it was written at a time when the king they were actually referring to wasn't the King Robert the Bruce so much as the King of Scots, but the king over the border that the Scots had no control over. But it's still regarded, it's regarded as a precursor for the American Declaration of Independence. So much so that Tartan Day in America, in New York, is on this day, the 6th of April, to celebrate that very fact. There are one or two points which are worth saying. It's that today we live in a different Scotland, a Scotland which sees its links to the world being lopped off in the name of an English nationalism that neither knows about Scotland nor cares about it. There's quite a lot being said about the fact that we get all this stuff from English nationalist stuff about Henry VIII and all these wonderful celebrations of this, that, and the next thing. Have either of you noticed any celebrations of the Declaration of Arbroath on the national television?
Nothing. The only thing I know about is the link I posted actually on iWrite, on the iWrite website, to Leslie Riddoch's. Well, Leslie is part of the film, which gives you a wee short history of the Declaration of Arbroath.
It was a good film. The guy that made it was called Charles Stewart. I would have thought you'd have remembered that, Norrie.
Is he an STEW or an STAU?
From my position, it doesn't matter, but he's an STU. Right. I have a position that says it doesn't matter.
Well, I'm Scum Stewart. I'm no royalty.
All right.
Jimmy, any thoughts on the Declaration of Arbroath?
Not really, mate. There's the odd wee thing popping up on folks' timelines and what have you. There's various online stuff going on this afternoon. Yeah, it's an important anniversary in one way. It's almost meaningless at the moment. It just gets lost in the froth that is the virus. So, when you mention English royalty, can we just have a puppet Betty appearing on the telly and last night and invoking the ghost, although she's not quite dead yet. I'm not quite sure. I don't think if Dame Vera Lynn will meet again. Well, I do hope not, Betty. I really hope not.
I think it's worth saying that the assumption is, of course, in England that getting the Queen on to say something will bring the country together. But all the polling in recent years for the support for the Queen in Scotland is that the support is in a very small minority. So it will not bring the country together in Scotland.
No.
Well, I don't know how, because it would be on every channel at the same time, I presume. But I missed it.
That's what I've got. One thing, sorry, Jerry, but there was a claim that it was the most popular TV show watched this year. No wonder it was on every bloody channel. You could, if all you ever watched was a main channel, you couldn't get away from it.
Aye, thank heavens for Netflix.
I think it's worth noting that the Declaration of Arbroath, when it talks about the people, it's really referring to the landed gentry, the barons. It's not talking about the wee boy that's got the tumshy stall in the market.
No, it comes from a different era, quite clearly.
You know, so a lot of it, I would imagine if they were writing it today, they wouldn't use the word the people. They would use something like, I don't know, anybody with £1 million in the bank. So although it looks great to modernize, what it actually means is something a bit different.
Well, it's still about holding the leader of your country to account.
Well, I mean, the claim that the people are sovereign is the really important thing.
Well, it is. There is no such thing as a king or queen of Scotland. It's a king or queen of Scots.
And apparently it was quite influential in Europe. I know the claim that it was influential in the American Declaration of Independence, but a lot of people don't realize that it had quite an effect in Europe at the time. Of course, people forget how integrated with Europe Scotland was, even back in the, what would it be, the 1500s, 1300s?
1320, 700 years ago.
Right enough. I should have been able to work that out. Hey.
Would you like me to finish with a quote?
Okay, go ahead.
We are not, and we will never be a garland on the crown of a Tory Prime Minister. We are more than a convenient site to part the UK's nuclear weaponry. We are more than a tartan fig leaf to allow the British state to pretend it's greater than its nationalism, and its nationalism isn't just the nationalism of a greater England. There you go.
That was a quote from Ouija Doug.
Wee Ginger Doug. Wasn't he from the Declaration?
Aye. Well, I suppose we should stick with Scottish politics and move on to the Ruth Wishart article.
Oh, aye.
Which was a bit supportive of Danny Gavarelli's article.
Get that one day.
Yeah, I will do. Which attacked Salmond. But she finished with, I think, what's probably more relevant, with a warning to the SNP not to fall into the trap that the Labour Party continually falls into, and not to start a civil war. Jimmy?
Go to Stuart, mate. I've not read it.
Oh, right. Okay. Stuart?
Well, she's making the link, as you wouldn't be surprised to hear. As I say, what lessons when we learn the Labour Party? Well, it's you don't really, even the listeners and viewers will know what I'm about to say. The lesson is any party that's driven, that's had the infighting civil war that the Labour Party for the last 5 years or so is unelectable. And with an election coming up next year, we need to be very careful where we stand and what we say and do if we want the SNP to win the election next year. She doesn't take either side. She did in the Salmond prosecution case, but she does, I think she sits squarely in the middle and says, look, there's fault on both sides, which means that she is accepting that there is almost certainly a conspiracy on the government side. And there's obviously a bit of phantom. There's a lot of noise on the pro-Salmond side.
I think you're reading an awful lot into what she said if you're claiming she said there's a conspiracy on the government side.
No, she didn't say that, but she said it was even-handed.
Well, I still think you're reading a lot into it, but never mind. She didn't really say anything I wouldn't expect her to say. What I like about Ruth Wishart is she'll call a spade a spade. Mm-hmm. And I think she pussyfooted about by not coming down on one side or the other. Her warning is, I think, apposite. I do think that we need to watch we don't end up tearing each other's throats out. although the SNP, the movement, the Yes movement, of which the SNP is part, when it comes to voting, certainly for Westminster and Holyrood, do tend to come together. I noticed the latest poll has them at 51% for Holyrood. So it doesn't seem to, the salmon debacle doesn't seem to have dented their popularity.
Look,
Hence the reason that they're all coming out with articles desperately trying to spin it now, because the trial failed to split the support of the Yes movement. And now unionist newspapers and unionist writers are desperately trying to find ways to wedge a spoon in there and try and create division. It's what the whole thing was designed for in the first place.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as much as we all three of us probably might have enjoyed defending Salmond and talking about the conspiracy, we've been a bit selfish. If we actually want the movement to succeed towards independence, Ruth is probably right. We should probably let it rest, given that we've got a much bigger problem ahead of us with the virus.
I'm going to distance myself from that, defend Salmond, because I was never sure. I never came down on that side or t'other side. It just, and even now, I have to be honest, I think he was a pillock tack the way he acted. That doesn't make him guilty of anything, of course. Let's move on then. Let's talk about our beloved leader, Boris.
Oh God.
Who has managed to find himself in hospital.
How unfortunate.
It
Maybe if
seems,
he'd followed his own advice and socially distanced, he wouldn't have caught it in the first place.
Well, that's the serious side to this. I mean, I don't know if you'll remember the claim that he'd shook hands with everybody in the hospital he'd visited.
Yes, very Trumpian, that one.
Oh, that was very irresponsible. That's about as irresponsible as Catherine Calderwood.
Well,
Actually, it's considerably more irresponsible than anything that Catherine Calderwood done. Same way, hugging his pals at the dispatch, at the speaker's chair. High-fiving and hugging them after they'd had a parliamentary debate about some nonsense or other. But he hasn't followed his own advice. Neither has his chief medical officer. Neither did the health secretary. And none of them have had any comeback whatsoever other than sympathy.
Well, the other important point I think out of this is it's now been 10 or 11 days since he was diagnosed. So this self-isolation for 7 days
doesn't work.
Doesn't seem to work. So I hope that our free press, who are quite prepared to hound anybody in the SNP to death or associated with the SNP, are prepared to start hounding the various people down at Westminster about the isolation times.
Do the words danger and nay mean anything to you, Norrie?
Aye, well, it's the presser today was interesting for me. This is Nicola Sturgeon's press conference. Mm-hmm. You could almost foretell what papers were going to stay on yesterday's story.
Aye, very noticeable. As soon as she mentioned Express or Telegraph or Daily Mail, you knew what was coming.
Was it the Express guy that basically asked her if she shouldn't resign? He didn't use those words.
The best Jim was the boy for the Daily Mail. I wrote it down, mate, Michael Blackley, who, in my words, basically, his question was, are you worried that the public think you're a bit of a diddy?
Right. Look at that. The problem, sorry, but we were talking about the Prime Minister, weren't we? What worries me is, given that he's ill, who is actually running the country? Is Dominic Cummings still sick?
Or no, it's Rab. Rab's second in charge.
Well, they're humming and hawing about that. They don't want to admit it. They want, oh no, he's still running the country from this hospital bed. I mean, God, who is running the country? We look, it's about leadership. The Labour Party have failed in their leadership by having an election up for months, and they should have suspended that when this crisis come along. We know we've got a government of liars running this country. We should be challenging this.
Well, you're not going to get challenge on this because of our press.
I agree.
You know, I mean, there's two MSPs were at the top of a mountain last week together.
It was 2 weeks ago, mate.
Didn't go 2 weeks ago? Well, yeah. Even 2 weeks ago. This is the third week, isn't it?
No,
they were on top of that mountain a couple of days before lockdown was asked for.
Ah, yeah. Right. Okay, my apologies, people. I was about to give you duff information. Thanks, Jimmy. But the kind of the point I'm trying to get to is the press is only, because it's a free press, and it in fact has no obligations to the truth whatsoever, they will only follow strands that suit their political stance. Mm-hmm. Basically they're a waste of space.
Yep.
It's also clicks, don't forget. They desperately need the advertising revenue from what's online these days. They're hardly selling any paper copies.
I would have liked the First Minister to turn around to that particular questioner and just say, right, okay, I'll resign. We'll hold an election tomorrow. What do you think?
Aye.
Oh, well, on that basis, what did you think of her performance today under the pressure?
I thought she was solid, good, but I would have liked to have seen her turn around at some point and say, you know, okay, you guys are still playing politics. You're still playing the old game. Mm-hmm. I'm not.
She could have turned around and said, yes, I'll answer your questions, but I think what the public want to know about is the crisis.
Yeah, I think she could have turned into the boy for the Daily Mail and just said no, gave him a one-word answer, no. And by the way, you're wasting my time with stupid questions like that, so didn't ask for a one them on.
Well, I saw a tweet, I didn't read the article, but apparently Jackson Carlaw has come out and said that he still supports the First Minister.
Mm-hmm. Right, that'll be interesting to see.
Oh no, that was interesting. I noticed that the Greens, the Lib Dems, and the Labour Party all got stuck into her, but Jackson Carlaw didn't make an early quote.
I mean, well, Jackson Carlaw's got a political game beyond Holyrood, of course. It means that the SNP will find it very difficult to criticise the Westminster government.
Aye, that's true.
So his support is a double-edged sword.
Well, something that I wrote in at the start of the press, I'm just wondering, it's some of this slid under the radar because of all the questions and that, but do any of you guys think a lack of a comprehensive reporting system for deaths could prove to be embarrassing? We're 5 weeks into this now, and we're getting yet more changes to how they report deaths coming up on Wednesday.
No, I don't think so. I think she's explained it pretty clearly, Jimmy, how it's come about. It's partly because of the Scottish system of reporting deaths, and partly because, of course, it takes 2 or 3 weeks for people to die from. I don't think she's avoiding the issue. We will find out. On you go.
I just think 5 weeks in to people dying, we maybe should have had in place a clear system to tell us how many people died in each 24 hours.
The problem is there are different ways. You know, until you get a death certificate, the death can't be reported. It's very quick between a death in a hospital death certificate and the reporting of it. In the hospital situation, you die at home, you die in an old folks home. I mean, you can die with no doctor there in an old folks home. The doctor has to come down and establish cause of death.
Yeah, but there's also this thing where, and I understand why they're doing it, but there's no danger either the UK government or the Scottish government are going to give us figures for people that have died, picking this up purely in the community who have no relationship whatsoever to an NHS or care worker? That would be a vital number to know. And we're not going to get to know that, because then people would start asking questions about the lockdown.
Well, how do you, well, look, come on, apart from the early part of this virus crisis, how do you know where you caught it?
Well, most folk are going to have caught it through contact with somebody that works in a hospital, mate. Given where they're testing.
You don't think they're going to catch it just in the community, in the supermarket, in the bus, in the train?
I don't know, because they're not giving us that kind of information, but given that they're not testing, given that they're not testing the general public, how are they going to know?
They are testing the
general public.
They're
only testing people in care. They're testing diddy numbers of the general public.
No, they're testing the general public the way they test for flu. They're using the same system, and they're upping it to 100,000 a week, I think it is, which they then extrapolate out. If you're talking about them following up on infections, i.e. I catch it, who did I see, send a wee guy out to speak to them.
They can't do that in the UK, I don't think.
Well, I believe they tried to do it at the beginning. But the problem with reporting deaths, you know, it's about the time from the death certificate, because that's the information you need to tell you whether coronavirus was involved. It's the time to get a doctor in to sign that, to pass it on. There might well be cases where people keel over very quickly with this. I don't know. And a doctor goes in and says, oh, it was a heart attack, not even realizing they had coronavirus. I just don't know. So unless you test everybody that dies, which then gives you the lag time for the test to prove positive, you're always going to be going back to update your figures.
Mm. Well, look,
it's not straightforward.
Well, look, Jimmy,
I just didn't think changing it every week, every few days helps.
Jimmy, well, in theory, they're only going to change it this week. It will be adjusted by the end of the week.
They changed it a couple of weeks ago, Stuart. This will be the third different. This will be the third different method of reporting.
Well, I have to disagree with you on that one, Jimmy. Jimmy, you're the betting man, right? There's all sorts of rumours about that the lockdown's going to get far more serious this week, and that they need it in London, because London, the virus is 2 weeks ahead of Scotland in London, but we don't need it. So what happens? Will they bring it in, and how does it affect Scotland when we don't need it?
I think they will bring it in. I think the panic has really set in the Tory party in London now. Whatever they do isn't making much effect, and Birmingham's becoming just as bad as London is. They can tell us till the cows come home that the curve is flattening somewhat in London, but if you look at the UK as a whole, the curve's it's nowhere near flattening as yet. It's still going skyrocket, and we're going to go way past where Italy and Spain went in terms of the curve of upward infections.
I think that's what nobody's publicly will admit, but we know that.
Well, I think if they do bring in more stringent measures in England, Scotland should do it. Purely and simply because that gives us a two-week buffer to hopefully make a bigger difference.
Well, that's fair. What about did anybody see the pictures last weekend, it was, or the middle of the week, of the roadblocks where the Welsh police were putting up on the roads coming in from England? Was that real?
Didn't see it.
Not as far as I know. Not as far as I know. The roadblocks were actually, if I remember rightly, it actually wasn't a picture for last week. Sure, it was a picture for a while back.
Fake news.
I mean, certainly the BBC have been reporting at the start on police pulling cars in just to question the driver about whether they need to travel.
Yeah, I think the police, England have a problem with the police anyway in terms of how they have reacted, various forces doing different things. I think fortunately we've got one force up here, so even though the chief constable's a bit of a horse's arse, you can only hope that the actions of the police didn't necessarily reflect his horse's arsedness. But one other thing for the presser before we finish, guys, again, I note that staff absences in the Scottish NHS are running at around about 6%, which is markedly different from absences south of the border. They were looking at close to a quarter at one point. I think they were about 22, 23%.
She was asked a question about,
yeah,
it wasn't absenteeism, was it? She was asked how many staff have actually caught COVID-19.
Yeah.
And she couldn't answer it.
That was a triple. It was a triple question, and she didn't really answer it. She did say, I'll get back to you about it."
I would have thought, well, yeah, I suppose that is a figure you should have.
There was another one actually for the lassie for the Daily Record, was it? He was hinting at something that COVID-19 had been downgraded somewhat, and Nicola Sturgeon said she'd have to get back there on that because she didn't recognise it. Now,
no, it was a document. It was a document. The record had seen.
That document, if it sounds awfully like one that I seen last week, and that was referring specifically to NHS England, and they'd not downgraded what it was. It was no longer an unknown quantity, therefore it was downgraded somewhat. You know, they know what the virus does. They know how it attacks.
Yeah, right. Okay,
Whereas
got you.
At the beginning, they weren't really sure. And if NHS Scotland's done a similar kind of thing, I wouldn't be that surprised, again, that they're following the lead of NHS England and doing the same thing.
Right.
I think the lassie for the record was just delving a stick deep into the pot and stirring, basically.
So to quote an American politician, it's no longer an unknown unknown, it's now an unknown known.
That's the kind of thing they were looking for.
Okay.
Oh, didn't he?
That'll be some sort of, it sounds like just some sort of technical banding, you know.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah. Okay. I think we should maybe mention Mr. Starmer's new, or who's been dragged into his shadow cabinet recently. He's certainly moving to the right.
Yeah, I was paying very little attention to that, I'm afraid. Yesterday I thought, yeah, he's probably going to... Who's got the top jobs?
Well, it's all middle of the road.
Is it? Well, he's a bit vanilla, silly, let's be honest. He might have been a damn fine lawyer, but his political career, such as it is, has been particularly vanilla. So if his cabinet reflects that, I'm not that surprised.
Well, apparently I discovered yesterday that he was Director of Public Prosecutions and decided not to prosecute Savile.
That's fake news as well, mate. That's been running about for a couple of days, but it's not technically accurate. He did a couple of things around the Savile investigation, but he was the one that actually pushed Operation U-Tree, which isn't a great thing to claim about. But then when it comes to sexual offences in England, I didn't think anybody in either a police role or a DPP role can particularly think they've done much to be proud of over the last 40 or 50 years.
It is that kind of, it is weird when you think about it, because they went from doing nothing about accusations to believing every single word about accusations. And the place to be is in the middle.
Aye.
You know,
the middle road was never ever found.
Aye. Difficult.
So can I ask, because I missed it, his new cabinet, I gather that the two losing finalists, Rebecca Long-Bailey and Lisa Nandy, were both given posts. Beyond that,
Nandy's shadow foreign secretary.
Oh well, there's a high-profile role, I suppose. Who's the chancellor?
That woman for Aberdeen that's got the...
Her with the funny hair.
Aye, got the English seat. I can't remember her name.
Annalise,
yeah. She's actually very competent on camera. She's been on Politics Daily a few times, and she's actually quite impressive.
All right. What about the really important one? Scottish Secretary, Shadow.
Not been announced yet. As far as I know, Long Bailey hasn't got a job yet.
I thought she had. That's what I thought.
I didn't notice it if she did. It might have been announced this morning. I haven't kept up with it. But that's just bored me to death. Can we have points out of 10 for the cartoon in the background, boys?
I can't.
Outstanding, mate. I would give it a
Thank you.
solid 9.
We could do with the extra pair of hands. Yes, it's lovely. Who did that then?
That's from The Guardian. Ben
Right.
Jennings from The Guardian.
Ben
Shout
Jennings.
out to him.
I take it that's Boris.
Well, it isn't actually supposed to be Boris, but I thought, seeing as if Boris is back in hospital, it would be Apposite. I've used Apposite twice today. I've got to watch myself.
Charles Johnson, do you think they do the plague masks and the whole outfit in supersized versions for somebody with a heat massage?
Well, you can get them on eBay for about £9, mate.
Yeah, me and Ricardo were thinking of getting them and taking a stroll on Great Junkie Street to annoy everyone.
Would it be in very bad taste to speculate on whether Boris will die or not?
Yes.
And what happens?
in a word, yes.
Existential crisis.
I'll leave it at that.
If Boris dies, they've got to pick a new leader of the Tory party.
And well, they'd have to, because until then it's Dominic Raab, and seriously, he genuinely can't find his arse with 2 hands and an assistant.
Well, I mean, I think from that point of view, it is a legitimate question to ask. We know what happens. I cannot believe that Raab is going to take the helm. No,
I think there'll be a wee kitchen cabinet coup there, and Raab would be removed because he's just so singularly unimpressive in everything that he does.
Okay, a difficult question, guys, because there's nobody that we really want to be in charge in the Tory party. But who would you rather see at the helm if Boris was indisposed for any reason, length of time?
Keir Starmer.
I said Tory. You've got to pick one.
It's a difficult one, mate. It really is. Peter Bone, just for the comedy value.
I didn't have to think about this very hard. Do you know the guy that I think would do the best job? Gove.
Oh, God save us. He's totally in Murdoch's pocket. Him and his wife.
Well, that's the problem with Michael Gove, mate. You're effectively making his missus Prime Minister because he's a mouthpiece for her.
Right, she's
the clever one. She's the Lady Macbeth.
Right, and she's the mouthpiece for Rupert Murdoch.
Well, I was just thinking about what he had achieved, although I disagree with most of it. But he made things happen when he was at education. Yeah, and he made them happen quickly. He strikes me as somebody who could marshal the troops. I don't know.
And march them off the end of a cliff.
Well, he's got another problem, of course. He's very close to Cummings. Cummings was his advisor. But he does strike me as the most competent of a fairly incompetent bunch.
Well, given that he's the most effective thing that he's done in his political career is stab Boris Johnson in the back the last time he tried to be leader. I didn't think he'd last very long in that position if he was given it. I think the Tory party's jump to the right would possibly fall apart if Boris disappeared.
Taken out with a headshot. Okay, guys, unless anybody's got something they'd like to finish with. And silence was the answer. Thanks very much, Jimmy Hutton, Stuart Lockhead. I'm Norris Stewart. And we'll no doubt be back annoying you tomorrow, folks. Thanks for listening, watching, and cheerio for now.